Hello. Glad you could join as we focus this day on God's holy word. Now, today's sermon comes from Mark, the 12th chapter, and we learn about how not to be as God's holy people and a great example from a widow. So, in the theme of looking at faithful widows, I'm going to begin by reading from 1 Kings. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he set out and went to Zarephath, where when he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel, so I may drink. As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. But she said, As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple sticks, so I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it. Bring it to me, and afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, The jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. She went and did as Elijah said, so that she as well as her household ate for many days. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. As he taught, Jesus said, Watch out for teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted in the marketplaces, and have the most important seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. Such men will be punished most severely. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put, and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasure than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. Here ends the gospel reading. Think of the temple in Jerusalem. This massive stone structure that was so important for the Jewish people is really the heart of the Jewish faith. People would gather there every day by the hundreds or thousands during festival days. The place would be abuzz with all kinds of activity. Of course, back then there were sacrifices done, all kinds of different burnt sacrifices and other type of sacrifices done for the people that they would do themselves, and of course the priests would do for the entire nation, all who had faith in God. This temple had different areas or courts, so only certain people could be in certain places. And it was just a place of activity, a place that was so important, really kind of the heart of the city. It's kind of like, say, like here in America. We have our towns, and oftentimes there's a lot of towns that are designed with the churches on the square, and there's all kinds of important buildings around that. Well, same way with the temple in Jerusalem. You had the temple itself, but then all kinds of other important buildings and marketplaces. It was just a hub of activity, the focal point for the Jewish people, the heart of Jerusalem. Now, today we see Jesus teach at the temple, and what Jesus teaches today is actually part of a long series of him teachings. Actually, in Mark chapter 11, 12, and 13, a lot of it takes place at the temple in Jerusalem. So our lesson takes place after a series of teaching, And in it, we learn lots of important lessons, just like the important lesson Jesus says previous to this gospel reading, that the greatest commandments are to love the Lord with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and that we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Is an important, valuable lesson, just as what we learn today. Lessons about how not to be as God's people, how to live in that grand holiness, and be people who give. Now, today, when Jesus teaches, he teaches and he talks about people who are teachers of the law. Now, as the name suggests, these people taught the law. Now, they're also more than just teachers, they are legal experts. These are legal experts who understand and know the laws that are within the Bible. In other words, this would be the first 5 books of the Bible for them. And in it, these teachers of law, they would know all these commandments, all 613 commandments, their interpretations and applications. These people, most likely, these teachers of law, would have all these memorized. They would be a people that others would look up to, say, look at their holiness and just admire them, and also go to for advice or actual legal documentation and legal work, because they're also lawyers. Now, these are the teachers of the law that Jesus talks about. And of course, he doesn't really paint them in the best light. For the teachers of the law Jesus talks about, the people that Jesus warns others about, they really don't do good. As Jesus says this day, watch out for teachers of the law, like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted in the marketplaces, and have the most important seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses. For a show they make lengthy prayers. Such men will be punished most severely. The teachers of the law, as I said, they're supposed to be the examples for all to see. Supposed to be great. I mean, these people are known well and should have a holiness of God, yet they don't. They don't. They do so much wrong. They use their power and prestige for just fame, just so people look at them, so they get attention, so they get kind of special favors. And even worse, as Jesus says, they devour widows' houses. Now, this means that these people, they're really taking advantage of the most vulnerable in society. Because widows at the time of Jesus, just like any culture and time widows often are, were really kind of tenuous at best on how they lived. Because a widow would rely on her children or family for support. Sure, there were jobs, but often those were very scarce. And if a widow was ill or old and couldn't work, they're in trouble, especially if the widow didn't have any means of support. Now, these teachers of the law, they abuse their position to get what the widows have, all they have to live on, their houses. Now, they could do this by subterfuge with, them being important and even famous and trying to get money that way or possessions, or by legal means, much like a lawyer, because they were lawyers, manipulating things so they could take the widow's money and possessions, literally their houses. This is the sin and problem of the teachers of the law that Jesus warns us about. Warns us about these people who look for attention and fame so they can get, their own egos boosted and just to be looked at by everyone. And of course, to take from the most vulnerable in society. Now, in the year 2021, are there people like that today? Are there people who will take from the most vulnerable in society? Yep. I'm sure you're used to hearing in the news about scammers doing all kinds of things to take from the elderly. I'm sure you've known of people who are famous and, of course, They like to find ways to get money out of people with donations or help or some kind of scam so they can be richer and richer. Or maybe lawyers. Lawyers that, like the teacher of the law Jesus warns about, abuse their power and position. Abuse in such a way that wills are signed, assets are taken, or overbilling. And they literally, just like Jesus warned, devour widows' houses. We must look out that we do not become like those teachers of the law, because the temptation is there for us to abuse any power that we have. Yes, you might not have a lot of power, but that's always there. You could do wrong. You could be like the teacher of the law. You could be somebody who says, hey, look at me, look how great I am. Look what I can do, and let me take what you have. No, we are to be a faithful people. A faithful people don't have those attitudes. Instead, we have a very humble way of living, a humble and way of giving. For we are to be a giving people, a faithful people who really give from the heart, what is within, out of devotion, out of great love for the Lord. Now, Jesus, as he's in the temple, he finishes his teachings and he sits down. And there he watches people give their offerings. And he notices a widow who puts 2 little coins in. And Jesus, he says about this woman, I tell you this truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than others who gave out of their wealth. But she gave out of her poverty everything she had to live on. Can you imagine that? This woman, she gives all she had to live on. And all she had was just 2 little coins. Now, the coins that the widow had, that we learn about in our lesson, they were very, very low in denomination, because they were only worth, as the lesson says, a fraction of a penny. Actually, like anywhere from 1/8 to 1/16, depending on the math you're using for them and their value at the time. Such a very, very small amount, but that is all that woman had to live on. Can you imagine doing that? Giving all you had? Like, take stock right now. The money you have in your wallet, the money you have in your purse, the money you have in your safe at home, the money you have in your bank account, the money you have in stocks and bonds, the money in your retirement fund. All that money, just kind of add it up and figure out what that would be. And you give it all away. That is what the widow did. All that money she gave to God out of devotion, out of trust, out of truly knowing the power of God. She had faith, a great faith to give. And we too should have that great faith. A faith that gives from the heart, from what we truly have, not just because we have extra lying around, or, and we feel like giving just because we have, here's a couple bucks sitting here and there. But no, really giving. Truly giving from the heart. That is who we are as Christians. We are people who truly give. Truly give because we love the Lord and we love others, knowing that what we do is powerful. It is powerful because we give what our neighbors need. Now, we as a people, of course, we give, and we give lots of missions and things. And in our church, we have each month a special mission. And this month's special mission is Church World Service. Now, Church World Service is actually a pretty big organization. It's actually made up of 37 different Christian denominations. So that's a lot of people joined together to do the wonderful work of Christ. Now, I'll just read a little bit about what they do. Church World Service is a global organization founded in 1946. Church World Service works with partners to eradicate hunger, poverty, promote peace and justice around the world. Church World Service meets disaster relief needs, recovery, provides assistance, resettlement services for refugees, and helps the root cause of hunger. church world service uh, is many Christians joined together to do the work of Jesus across this earth. We Christians, we give in powerful and wonderful ways because that is who we are. That is what we are as far as of Christ. Just like this widow, we have that focus, that right focus that gives what we truly have instead of what is a surplus. We give because we know it is right. We give because we have that ethic of giving. Now, what can stop us from giving? What can stop us from giving truly from the heart? Truly giving what is right? Greed. Greed that, of course, the world tells us to have. Greed that tells us to take more and more and more and keep taking. That's always there. Does greed stop you from giving? There once was a youth Sunday school class, and these little boys were asked by their teacher, would you, if you had $1,000,000, would you give it to the missionaries? And the boys said, yes, we would. And she said, if you had $10,000, would you give that money to the missionaries to help support the work of Jesus? And again the boys exclaimed, yes, we would. And then she said, if you had $1,000, would you give that money to the missionaries? And the boys said, yes, we would. And then she said, if you had $1, would you give that money to help support the missionaries? And the boys exclaimed, yes, we would, all except for one, little Johnny. And the teacher said, Johnny, why didn't you say yes? To this Johnny said, well, I have $1. Greed will tell us not to give. Greed will say, hold on to everything we have. Hold on, hold on. But we are to be a giving people, giving in the same spirit of the widow that truly gave of herself, that had the right attitude of giving. Because that's the thing. You notice that Jesus, he praises her not for, of course, the amount, because, of course, her amount was very, very small. But it's the attitudes within. All those other people, they gave a lot. Like, if you want to go by just sheer math, putting up the coins. But she gave in the right way, a way that was truly dedicated. And that's how we must be. We must be a people who are truly dedicated to giving. Truly dedicated because we know how we give is right. It does good in this world in powerful and wonderful ways. In 1947, evangelist Bob Pierce went to preach in the city of Xiamen, China. Now, as Bob was going around preaching, he was invited to a school to preach. And there at the school, he did his regular talk about Jesus. And one of the students decided to convert to Christianity. Well, this created a problem. The girl's name, White Jade, she was kicked out of her home. And a local person who, of course, ran the school was in distress. The person was distressed because here was another orphan to take care of. And this person asked Mr. Pierce, well, what are you going to do about it? At this, Pierce, he opened his wallet and he took out all the money he had. He only had $5. And he said, and he gave it to the teacher to help support, White Jade. And he said that every month he'd send more money and to the school to help support her. Well, so Mr. Pierce, he came back to the United States and he started talking to people about the need for people in China. And, of course, the results of his evangelism. And Mr. Pierce, he kept sending money to support White Jade and then also others like her. And eventually other people who heard about, and of course Mr. Pierce, he promoted this, he started an organization called World Vision, which became a very large non-governmental organization that works around this world for, of course, the benefit of people following the way of Christ. Marquis de Lafayette was a French soldier who helped out the Americans during the Revolutionary War. He was, of course, a personal advisor to George Washington, and he did a lot. Now, after the war, he went back to France and he ran his different estates. He owned a lot of different land. And then in one year, in the year 1783, there was a harvest that was really bad. Now, the harvest was bad for a lot of the farms that surrounded where Lafayette was. And because of this, a person said to Lafayette, well, of course, everybody else had a bad harvest, so that means it's time for you to sell. And of course, you can sell at a very high price. But Lafayette, he thought about this advice and said, no, this can't be good, because here there were people who were starving. Because of the bad harvest in France, there were those who were needy. So Lafayette said, no, it's not the time to sell. It's the time to give. We are to be a giving people, a wonderful giving people that truly give of ourselves, give from our hearts, just like the widow. So be like her. Be a person who gives out of love, out of the duty that comes from being a follower of God. Be a person that doesn't hold back or doesn't think that giving is only what you have extra lying around. No, be a true giver, a person that gives and cares and loves, because that is part of the essence of giving. Not only duty to God, but duty to our neighbors, that great love we are to have. Be a giver, and don't fall into the trap of this world that will say, you should only look out for yourself, like the teacher of law Jesus warns about. Look for fortune and fame, even swindle people, steal from others. Go ahead. No. Instead, follow the way of the Lord that cares and loves, that is powerful, so powerful. Just like the widow that gave 2 small coins so long ago in the temple. Amen.